Hello.
Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Welcome to another edition of Let's Build CPQ with Bill Barlas. How you doing, man?
I'm very well today. How are you, Chris?
I am doing great. Uh, can't get enough of AI right now. Honestly, we're not going to talk about that necessarily, but I'll say that, you know, when it's not hard, at least as you start to use these tools. Like I look for pieces and parts to say, like, okay, if the AI doesn't know, a whole lot about this topic, that's a bad sign for like the human race, like
Yeah,
in general. And CPQ, happens to be one of those topics. So when we say it's like one of the things that the most challenging pieces of the stack, right? It truly is. And that's why, I had the idea today, last time we kind of started to define, configure, price quote. Um, But today wanted to talk about, just an idea, the other end of the spectrum, right? Because a lot of this is another one of, no matter how hard this tool is, there's still like push button stuff out there that says this is the easy button, right?
mhm.
And a lot of people do that, and then it doesn't go so well.
Yeah,
So maybe helping some people through like what they should be thinking about as they see, oh, this CPQ might work for me, right? What kind of questions should they be asking themselves? Is that a good topic
it
for
is.
you today?
Absolutely. It's a wonderful topic, and I think a good way to sort of get into discussing proper implementation, how to sort of think about this in the most effective way for your organization. And I'm going to really start off the conversation talking about what level of commitment is required in order to implement a CPQ well. So, thinking about CPQ as a concept, it really is another core pillar in your RevOps and enterprise software digital transformation journey. So, in the same way that the acronym CRM means a whole lot of things, CPQ does as well. ERP, it's that level. So when you think about it, as a chair you're sitting in, it's that three-legged stool. CPQ is really it's the third leg of this. It's not a push button thing you can just do in the same way that HubSpot really isn't. It needs to be integrated into your organization. You need to be thinking about this as like a full-on digital transformation initiative, not really as much like, oh, I'm going to push a button and now I've got CPQ. You wouldn't do that with a CRM. You wouldn't do that with an ERP or an accounting software or anything else that you put into your business to sort of have that digital transformation success. And you wouldn't do it with a CPQ either. Um, and so I think there's a lot of things you can do to simplify it, but a simplified implementation of it is really one that the complexity is understood well by the people helping you do it. It's not that it's a simple thing to do. Um, so
Right. So what am I, so on that, in that vein, like what, if I'm a leader or the person buying, like what am I actually committing to, like in
yeah,
terms of maybe most people have trouble committing to this or that as a part of the process.
right, absolutely. So I think I'd like to sort of reframe that a little bit. I think a lot of leaders coming into organizations already have some kind of CPQ capability in place, right? Whether it's happening on a spreadsheet or you have a tool that's doing it. So it's sort of where you are in your digital transformation. You are doing CPQ as an organization, right? So that investment is happening. Whether it's something you're super aware of and how that's happening or not is a different thing. But if you have any size of business larger than an SMB, you do have a CPQ capability of the organization. You have to, in order, at least in B2B, in order to be selling. So understanding baseline where you are and what your current investment is super important. And I think there's a lot of leaders out there that come into roles where they already have CPQ of some kind in place. Um, so understanding that, and then in terms of commitment, I think what you're really looking for is a few things. One is the proper partner to help you execute this. whether it's the vendor themselves, a software vendor coming in to help you, whether it's a third-party consulting firm that's coming in to implement something that a vendor has, or a fully custom solution. I think one of the major investment points is picking the right partner. And there's a lot of questions. So as somebody that's sort of seen behind the curtain on this, there's a lot of questions I would be asking to a vendor or a partner when I'm sort of first interviewing with somebody.
Right. No, and if I can just,
Yeah.
but Bill,
Yeah.
I own the place. I know all about our products. I built all the different configurations. I know where we get the stuff from. I know how much it costs. I know how much we sell it for. Like, why do I need you to help me figure out this system?
Yeah, well, so the key point is that unlike a CRM, a CPQ has sort of a flavor of a software development project, right? So when you're doing a CPQ implementation, there are some key, I hate to say best practices, it's an overused industry buzzword, but there are some good practices for how to implement a software development project. And I think a partner that really understands that is going to help you, because there will be templates, proper project planning, a proper structure for specification. So just because you understand everything, right, and maybe you are at the point of product data readiness, like you just described, getting that into a tool has a ton of complexity to it, right? So how we start is we do an early assessment. We understand where you are in the process, and then we start to document that out, and then document out what the future looks like. And then we go into a real requirements gathering session and like nail down each and every little component of a project. And as an agile practitioner myself, it does sort of grind me a little bit to be doing a more waterfall methodology. But what we've learned is that for CPQ specifically, in the early stages, when you're going from a spreadsheet into a software solution, using a more waterfall approach usually does make a lot of sense. And so having a partner that's going to help you document requirements, build those functional design documents, build out all of these different design artifacts, using AI to gather all of your business logic into a format that can then be uploaded into a CPQ. All of these things are super critical to the success of the project. So when you're first implementing, probably a waterfall approach with all of these design artifacts is super necessary. So, yeah.
And when you say waterfall, it used to mean like gather as much as possible, like up front, right?
Yes.
And then start to carry down.
Yes,
Like, yeah, that
exactly.
makes sense, because like I know I've experienced some of the challenges when watching like engineering teams, and it's like, no, like being empathetic to them, they have built out these very complex infrastructures of how they code products, how they make sure, how they've built their own systems out to ensure that they're building the right thing,
Yep.
right? But that's much different from needing to put it onto a quote or on a website so
Of
that
course.
somebody else understands it, right?
Exactly.
Which is the part where
Absolutely.
it's like, if you leave any of that out, you start to get yourself into some trouble, pretty quickly.
Yeah. Now, what you can do, so while the direct implementation of components of the software may be done in a waterfall manner, what you can do is sort of implement like an enterprise agile thinking. So let's say that you have a company that has 50 inside salespeople, and then they also have a rep network, a distribution network, and a direct sales component to their business, right? So what you can do is you can take all of those projects and take them as initiatives, right? And maybe you do the initial implementation for your 50 inside sales users, logging into HubSpot, doing a configuration, saving it back, generating a document that gets sent to the customer. Maybe that's one piece that is waterfall, right? But in your overall structure is more of an enterprise agile concept where you're identifying this is a big piece of work that needs to be done. We sort of push through that piece and then we move on to the next piece. And one thing I have seen is that some organizations do take on too much all at once. So they say, we're going to do it for the sales reps, we're going to do it on the website, we're going to do it for our distribution network, all of these different things. And so a better way is to say, okay, let's pick one finite topic with a clear return on investment, plan the project out, understand, clear return on investment, some KPIs to track this to success, implement that, and then move on to the next piece. So that's a clear way to avoid some of these pitfalls. The other thing about that, what that can do for you is you're making a large investment in a software technology. Oftentimes, companies that you're purchasing the software from want to collect license fees. So, in order to be successful, something you can do is you can say, okay, we're going to do, just the inside salespeople first. Now we're live with the tool, we're getting some benefit from it, right? So it sort of de-risks, as a portfolio owner that's reporting into leadership or ownership of a company, taking on a piece of your overall initiative, getting that funded, making sure that's successful, getting it live, which has a whole group of requirements to it. That's a huge win. And then funding the next part of your project is a lot easier. And so, it's sort of that crawl, walk, run thinking in terms of how to do these implementations. And organizations that I've worked with that have done it that way, I've seen be dramatically more successful. So if you try and bite off the, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What do you think leads to the? I've never done this before, but I feel like we can just do all of our quoting situations like right now. Like, why do we have to split it all up?
Yeah, I think some of that does come from like an overzealous purchasing experience. So I think you get these great demos, all these amazing capabilities. You start to see, oh, I could have some real ROI on this type of stuff. Everybody gets really excited. The other thing is financial buckets sometimes come into play. So asking for money once instead of multiple times, things of that nature can also have an impact on this. I don't want to be negative, but these are all things that really can sort of contribute. And so, I think in everything all at once as fast as we can approach lends itself well to, the opportunity for the vendor to sell more software, opportunity for the organization to, have, one leader emerge as a hero type of thing. But, the real hero is the person that keeps showing up and, executing on small and winnable initiatives every day. And so, I think that there's a lot of reasons why organizations sort of end up in that trap. But, I do my best every time I'm in a sales process to guide away from that. So, yeah.
And that's why you work with great partners like Bill.
Full circle. Yeah.
And I don't have a good segue into this, but I know, like, in my experience with almost any kind of software, it's like we buy the thing, and then we try to recreate our process inside of the thing.
Yes.
Like our paper process, right? I guess I should ask for, like, have you ever seen that work? Like,
I will answer the question a different way. The biggest wins that we've seen are the ones where we spend time at the front of the project restructuring and agreeing on how something should work. And if you do that, it's magic because you've got the structure that works, it makes sense. And whether that's reminiscent of your existing process or not, I think it's more about how well your existing process is working. So I guess there have been times where the existing process is good and you're automating it, but so I guess it does happen. But
Well,
this is broken clock
right.
right twice a
I
day.
think like the key is, like you said at the beginning, there is a process. Like whether you're managing it like it's a CPQ tool or not, there is a process. You've got quotes going out the door.
Yeah,
You're making some kind of margin to create the success that you've had.
yeah,
And that's where just starting to understand current state. And this is why it's important, because instead of thinking like, oh, I just need to get this Word doc out because that's how I do it now,
yeah,
right? You're investing a lot of money to do it in a much, much better way than
yeah,
that. So that's where like doing that work up front, which that's where it's like less of a, maybe less of a software buying activity, more of a change management activity, because that's where
yeah.
people have to buy into that right out of the gate, right?
Oh, for
So what do
sure.
you do to help, like, obviously there's usually a champion, somebody that's decided to get CPQ. How do you help them get others like on board with, okay, maybe we do need to rethink our process?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's always a challenge, and one of the things I'm always praying for is that I see a C level on the sales activity. I think we've talked about this a bit before because it does touch so many different parts of the organization. So there is sort of always a hope for a trickle down effect. Um, a lot of the times when there isn't sort of that high level organizational buy-in, a place where you can really get some wins is at the level of people using the software. So better user experience, easier quoting, these are all things that really can transform and push for investment. If you have your people that are actually writing quotes happy with what they're experiencing, that sort of drives further organizational buy-in pretty quickly. Um, there's an example customer who I was just having a conversation with the other day about, they were quoting these massive complex manufactured systems with spreadsheets, and the person that was doing it would have, his spreadsheets would crash and he'd lose it, or he just couldn't, like there was this constant like file structure mess going on. And um, we've been through several iterations with them of the tool that we're building, but at this point, this particular sales user is able to quote these extremely complex systems, 20 and 30 of them at a time, and in a stable manner. And um, that cheerleading has really gone up the chain pretty quickly. And so further investment is happening because of the wins that we're having on the ground. So it sort of does lead back to picking a small piece where you can get wins, especially if you're not way up there in the organization where you're able to sort of drive change from above. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Is there anything common about the quick wins that you're usually able to get?
Yep. Avoid complex integrations.
No.
So yeah, so the the things that really, you know, product complexity may not necessarily be that big of a gate to success. System complexity is the one that really typically hurts a project more. So if you go after the place order button in the first iteration, that's going to hurt you, right? No ERP integration in the first iteration, that will likely get you to a more successful outcome. So, it's understanding that integrations are complex and that there are typically issues with these things. Um, you really want sort of a groundswell of demand for, you know, having that capability in order to do it, because it can be quite difficult to do. So, um, I mean, a HubSpot integration, I'm not so afraid of, and I think it's usually necessary. So I'm not as afraid of a CRM integration, but like an ERP integration, even like a website integration, things like that. Before you have sort of that groundswell support, that can really hurt you. So avoiding integrations on your first iteration, I think, is a big opportunity for a win. Um, the other thing that you can do is once you have sort of that first initial grain of truth out there being used and operating, that's, and I don't see this often, but when I do it, it's very successful. Once you have that grain of truth, you can engage either with your partner or your internal technical resources and go into a more agile implementation model. Um, and that can be extremely successful for sort of going to get these next, these next opportunities. It doesn't always have to be a big project for the next piece. So my opinion is keep it extremely simple on the early implementation, gain some support organizationally, make sure that your product library is in there, that people are able to make their quotes successfully, improve that. So it's sort of sticking to the core competency of the software first before trying to integrate it and do other things with it is really, that's how you can sort of, show that success that we're looking for. Well, Chris, I think you're muted.
Thank you.
There you go.
That makes sense. But when you say avoid integration, and there's data in other places that we need to be in this place, like how do we avoid integration in that case?
Um, yes. So there is an ugly intermediate layer that can occur in that situation where there is some batching that's sometimes required or some more manual maintenance of the system. Um, I I would say though that, and this does actually lead back to what we were just talking about. If you were doing it on a spreadsheet before, the mechanism currently exists for getting that data out and putting it where it needs to be. So, maybe you're adding a little bit of awareness to existing organizational overhead, but typically you're not actually adding to that organizational overhead in any real or meaningful way by doing this. And when you think about the number of motions that a sales team of 50 are making versus like a product data manager that's maintaining pricing inside your CPQ, that's one resource now that's maintaining it and going from 2-week turnaround times to 2-day turnaround times on quotes. So, it's often worth it. And then, as you have that support, then you start to say, okay, we're going to start bringing all of our pricing and bill of materials and other data in from our ERP system directly. So it's an iterative approach, and there are some challenges, but overall, it's still typically better. So
Right. No, like I definitely agree. Usually the people that are doing a bunch of the work, especially the inside sales slash order management people that are manually already like
yeah,
supporting data entry everywhere, they're the people that can do the export, they
yeah,
can do the import, right? And start to make
yeah,
sure everything works. And it's also a good way to engage those people
yes, it is.
to understand, like, have you got everything? Like, how
Yeah,
much are they actually adding into the process as they enter data manually,
yeah,
right? There's so much to find um, sometimes. But let's talk about the wins. Like, what have you seen? What's the biggest surprise that you've seen? In terms of like, oh, I wasn't sure this was going to work, or I thought my process was good already. Like, what are your favorite kind of aha moments to see, like, once this thing is implemented?
yeah, absolutely. So, um, my favorite moment of any implementation, and it does happen. I mean, it happens every time at this point, but it's always wild to see all of the quotes actually in there and people using the tool and going in and running all of these quotes, and getting feedback on that. Um, my my biggest aha moment typically is around what you can do with the data once you have it in terms of quote velocity, and it's just even that simple view. We quoted 22 times today. That's something that leadership was not aware of before the system went into place. So I have that aha moment almost every time, and there's nothing I love more than spinning up a simple dashboard and saying, "Here's your data on what you're quoting." So
Visibility.
that's always that sweet, beautiful win is from that visibility of what what you're seeing. So you've improved the experience for the user, and you also now know what's going on the ground, and that's just absolutely in the high cotton when that happens. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's a hard sell, like before you actually see it the first time if you're a user, because they're in it every day. They're talking to each other every day. So like it feels like you know what's going on every day, but until you see that list, it's like, oh man, I knew I was doing a lot of work, but
Yeah,
man, I'm doing a lot of work. Like,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And that's when you start to get the help you need and all, start to get resources applied. So this has been awesome. I love, getting the chance to talk CPQ with you. I think it's definitely an important piece of the stack. And um, yeah, glad we could do this. I hope it was helpful, for everybody out there. Um, any last takeaways, for those watching?
I'm excited to work with all of you on improving your CPQ processes, and I'm happy. Let's build for Wednesday, November 13th. And I look forward to telling you more about. I've been kicking around some ideas around talking about how best to quote professional services. So that's hopefully one of
Oh
our next
man.
steps will be about
Yeah,
that.
that'll be exciting because that's like the next, once you get everything in the system, now we can
Yeah,
start doing some really fun stuff. So
exactly.
as you think about your processes, especially as it relates to quoting, how you show up, in the sales process, whether it be the field sales or inside sales or order management, find those opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. That was more.
Awesome.